everyone are so quiet, so I think we start. That's the sign. Warmly welcome to E-village and the first Morning Boost live this year. Yahoo! Has anyone of you been to a morning seminar since Corona or this year? Live? No, so first time for you too. Great. We are trying to get the technique with us as well, because we do, as we all do with the Morning Boost, we also have them on YouTube afterwards. We decided this time not to live stream this event, but our goal is to do that for the coming events. So if you're not being able to come here, you can also see them live, or you can also see them afterwards. So if you fall asleep now, you can watch afterwards as well as YouTube. You will get the link. But first, my name is Madeleine Wahlberg, and I'm community manager of E-village, started in March. And some of you wonder what is E-village, so that's what I would like to tell you a little bit about before we start to listen to today's speaker. How many of you have not been in this event area before? Is it new for anyone of you? Yes, some of you. Great. Warmly welcome. The other of you too, of course. But E-village means entrepreneurship village, and what we would like to do with this village is to have an area where entrepreneurs and people who are interested in innovations can meet and create all together. So when we talk about E-village, this is the area we are talking about. We are sitting in the center, in the heart of E-village right now, in the event area. But the E-village is the whole area around here, all the buildings that you see in on this map. And here we have, in this building, we have, to start with, in the beginning over there, we have Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship, where we have the entrepreneurial students. Some of you are from there, I guess? Yes, looks like that. Some of you smile, some extra. And that's really exciting. We also, here in this building up in the corner up there, we have Chalmers Ventures, who invest in companies, some from Chalmers, lots of them from Chalmers, but not all of them, some also not from Chalmers. And on the side and below you, this side and this side, we have Stena Center. And Stena Center, we right now have a bit more than 50 companies, startup companies, some of them from Chalmers, most of them from Chalmers as well, but some of them also from the city, from other sides, who want to get in contact with Chalmers somehow and have their companies here. So we have smaller startups sitting here, and also some companies who want to help startups in that phase. And then we also have on the other side, like, you know, Vikander's, the restaurant, because it's really important in a village like this to have somewhere to go and have a drink and eat. And this has actually been open also during all the Corona time, so it's been great to see some people there as well. In the same building, we have the Founders Loft. That's an incubators for companies as well. And in this area, we also have the Entrepreneurial Society, Chalmers Entrepreneurial Society. It's a student organization, and also Spark, the student organizations, are also sitting here. And then we have some companies that you see. I don't know where to point because I got two of them. But like you see, some buildings here, we have companies who have been in Stena Center or been in Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship and been in the area, but they are too big to be in Stena Center because they're only startups. So when you're too big, you could go over to sit at Johannesburg Science Park or Sahlgrenska Science Park or some other places. Or if you are in the area that you fit in here, so to say, we also work all together to fit in these companies in the area. So we have some companies who are about 20, 30, 40, one company now almost being 50 people who are also in the area. And they say it's really important to be in this area because we are close to Chalmers, we are close to the city, but we are right in the middle of the entrepreneurship spirit. So that's what we would like to create with E-village and get more people to come here and share that spirit with us. And here, like I said, this is the heart of it, Veras gräsmatta. And this is the central meeting point of area, event area of Chalmers E-village. And this is the place where we want the entrepreneurial and innovational events to be, like today. So if you would like to follow us at LinkedIn and of course Instagram and Facebook, we have Chalmers E-village as our to follow. So that's a good recommendation to follow us there, so you don't miss anything. Next time, these morning booths, this is the first time for this autumn and for this year live. And we are going to have this every second Wednesday. So here, it's an open space for everyone to come, but we would like you to give us some information if you're coming ahead, so we know how many sandwiches to order. But it's open for everyone to come and join these events. Some events here are open for everyone, and some events here are sometimes closed for just a smaller group. But next time, we are going to have a speaker, Madeleine. She's going to talk about from molecular biology to community building. And she's very good at talking about Gothenburg's tech and startup scene. So she's going to tell you a little bit more about that. But what everyone right now are here for is to listen to today's speaker, I guess. Yes. Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready.
You're ready?
Yes.
Come up. I'll give you an introduction while you're up here on the scene.
Okay.
So, Abderisak Adam.
Yes, that's my name. That's correct.
Warmly welcome.
Thank you so much.
Great to have you here.
Yes, I feel very
And
good.
I've been Googling you a lot.
Should I be worried?
Yes. No, definitely not. I'm extra proud after I've been Googling you that you are here today, actually.
Yeah.
A really inspiring story of your company and you as a person. You are PhD. You have a PhD at Department of Construction Management at Chalmers.
Yes, I got my PhD there. That's correct.
Good. So you have to correct me now. You see, so I'm right or not.
Yeah.
And you also founded the company Avidnote.
Yes.
That you're going to talk about more today.
Yes.
And while I was, I wrote many serious things down about you, like his research focused on public clients' capabilities in terms of planning and managing large, complex construction projects. Sounds great, doesn't it? He's going to tell you more about that.
No, I'm going to try to minimize that so people don't get bored.
Good. You're going to tell them so that they understand. But when I introduce someone, I'd like to do it more personal. And then when I looked and Googled you, I was in LinkedIn, and I saw something that your colleague wrote for 3 months ago on LinkedIn. So here you have a very nice picture of you. You don't see it because you're behind here, so maybe that's good or not. This is, do we get the technique to work?
I hope so. Otherwise, I could just borrow yours afterwards. Yeah, okay. It's just, now it's good.
Now it's good. Great. So your colleague wrote in LinkedIn, I just read it because I think it's such a nice text.
Yeah.
This is Abderisak Adam and I in 2nd grade, completing our school assignment of baking a cake for the class. When I came to Sweden in 1993 as a refugee, Abderisak took me under his wing. I owe him for learning to speak Swedish as quickly as I did. We stayed friends throughout our entire lives, and both of us studied at Chalmers University of Technology and got our master's degrees. While I immediately went into business after college, Abderisak went on and got his PhD. Being that, I have always felt that Abderisak is the single most talented person I know, even though his humility would never show it. I knew that one day we would do business together. About 2 years back, Sendev joined forces with Abderisak and a few childhood friends to create Avidnote. I think that's a nice text, isn't it?
Yeah.
You would like a friend of yours to write something like that at LinkedIn, wouldn't you? So warmly welcome. We are really interested to listen to you and hear your inspiring journey with Avidnote.
Yes, thank you so
Welcome.
much.
Applaud.
Thank you. So good morning, everyone. I'd like to welcome you all to this presentation on sort of startups and academia and everything in between. I hope this sort of presentation is going to be interesting and informative and intriguing and all those wonderful adjectives. But if they're not, at least I'm going to keep it short. So if it's torturous, it won't be for too long. My name is Abderisak Adam. Adam is my last name. Abderisak is my first name. Creates a lot of confusion. But now you know. I did my PhD here at Chalmers in civil and environmental engineering. I then started a startup company together with some of my co-founders are here actually, which is called Avidnote, where we enable researchers to be more efficient and sort of organize their research online. But that's not going to be the main focus of the presentation. Rather, the focus is going to be more on the journey and the sort of lessons learned throughout this journey. And of course, I'm still learning, so take it with a grain of salt. So the first part I want to talk about is the sort of methodology of building a startup company in general. And the things you need to consider. Then I want to talk about sort of the startup journey from going to PhD to entrepreneurship. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the lessons learned. And these are more generic lessons that I hope will benefit people who are not in the startup world. But hopefully, you should be able to benefit both types of groups. And then finally, some Q&A at the end. So to begin, I think we all know that sort of research is hard. Academia is hard. And it prides itself on being difficult. Because you're dealing with difficult research and, to be honest, difficult people also. So it's a very difficult environment. And then you're dealing with sort of a research project that's very, very strictly defined, and you have to work within the constraints of that very defined small problem for many, many years. And that tends to sort of bring people to become crazy. So when you come in as a PhD student or sort of undergrad, you have this sort of lofty vision. Everything's going to be good. You know, you have sort of optimism for the future, but then all of a sudden you become crazy. And so this is the journey I think a lot of us sort of know from the PhD side, that you start out sane, you become insane. And of course, there's some element of truth to this, even though I'm being facetious. Because academia, because you're sort of enclosed and you're working on this issue in isolation for so many years, you tend to become a little bit, you know, out there. And that's sort of the same for startups. So startups is the same thing. You work with a very small problem, one company, usually one product, one defined thing, and you work for that for many, many years until you either reach some sort of exit or you continue on with your company indefinitely. So it's a very similar process in that when you begin a startup company, you're very sort of elated and happy. You think everything's going to be great. You're already planning the exit. You think everything's basically fine. And then a few months later, inevitably you fall. So I think you can see some elements of truth, some elements of similarities between academia and startups. And before I continue on the presentation, I just want to touch on some of those points. So if you look in academia, the first thing you do is you sort of always identify the research problem. So you have a hypothesis or you have a research problem. You're trying to solve something, basically. You're not trying to redo works of other people. And the same thing in the startup world. You see a problem, you've identified it, and you think that maybe you can actually bring something that can help people with their problem. So within academia, you do this by rigorous research, qualitative, quantitative, and then within the startup process, it's the same thing. But there, instead of doing a study, you're actually developing a solution, something physical, tangible, or if it's digital, something that you can actually grasp in the real world that actually solves people's problems. So at the end of all research, you sort of end with more research is needed. Give me more funding, please. I want to continue on. And the same process is obviously true for the startup world as well, where you ask for, we have to keep developing, we have to keep raising, things have to keep rolling. And I want to touch a little bit on the startup process. So if you look at the sort of the methodology that is the standard methodology today for building a technology company, a startup company, you usually start by building, you identify a problem, as I said before, that you think that a lot of people are suffering with. And the best problems are usually the ones that you have some experience of. It's not you did some market research and you identified that 20% of people blah, 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 blah. No, it's that something that you experienced yourself. Because then at least you are the customer, right? At least one person would need that solution. So once you've identified the problem, what you then do is you build. You don't, and especially if you want to take in investment or otherwise, the best thing you can do is build. Don't just come with an idea. Start with the sort of, I can build something. I don't need to do the entire rocket ship. I can do a prototype. So what you do is you build an MVP, or a minimum viable product. So it's a product that is sort of scaled down. If you want to build a sort of advanced product that you have in your mind, just build the simplest sort of version of that product, and then see what people say. Do they actually like the product? Do you get some positive feedback, or is it maybe you should do something else with your time? The best thing to do is to make a basic version, because then you'll get feedback very quickly, instead of building for like 10 months and then you realize that nobody wants the solution. So this is always the best thing. Build easy, and then you measure. So you measure, do people like it? Do people come back? If it's a digital product, which Avidnote is, we have to look at the retention. Do people actually stay a week after, a month after, 2 months after, and so forth? Once you have data that shows that people are actually interested in your product, then you can continue on and building sort of a full-scale version of it. So build, measure, learn. It's sort of the blueprint. It's been going on for decades using this system, but it was really formalized by Eric Ries in his book, The Lean Startup, which I definitely recommend. So if you look at how we did this sort of in this process, when I was doing my PhD here at Chalmers, one of the main problems that I had was to keep track of all of my research. Because as a researcher, you're reading a lot of papers. Like on average, you read about 300 papers per year. So unlike this vision that you have, this romantic vision of a researcher, like Marie Curie sitting in her office, she has this brilliant thought. I never had that. But then again, I think this is true for most researchers as well. I think you do research in more similar to this setting that you see Einstein sitting here, in very depressing, morose, gray setting where you're reading, right? That's what you're doing most of your time. You're reading a lot of papers just to write one sentence. And sometimes that can be very sort of mentally exhausting. So the idea is you have to sort of read a lot of papers, but then you also have to keep track of all your notes, because when you're working as a researcher, you have these groups, you work within these groups, and usually people, just like Einstein like 70 years ago, they still print everything out and they take notes by hand. That's how I did it, that's how all of my colleagues did it. Or you email sort of back and forth. And we figured, well, there has to be a better way where you can keep track of everything, you can organize all of your research in one platform. And so we figured if we can digitize this process, then we can make it easier to search and organize and collaborate online. And that's exactly what we did. So with Avidnote, this is just a demo. On the left side, you can write your note in longer format. You can write entire chapters if you so desire. On the right side, you can sort of annotate your research paper. You can highlight, you can redact, you can colorize different things. And you can work, several people within one project. And then if you have an iPad, you can also take notes and so forth. Once you go back, you get an overview of all of your research papers, all of your notes, and all of your tags in one easy-to-use, beautiful interface. So that's basically the selling point for Avidnote, is to create an integrated platform for research where you can find your research papers directly within the app. So you don't need to go to Google Scholar or Web of Science, but you can find it within the app. You can keep track of all of your references. So if you're using Mendeley or Zotero, they're also compatible. You can sort of import or export your references. So the idea was to create this holistic approach towards research, a place where researchers can live and work. And currently we have many users who've been using the app like this daily or weekly for many months since we sort of launched. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that now. But first, in the next version of Avidnote, we're also planning to sort of integrate an AI algorithm. So we got accepted into OpenAI. I don't know if anybody knows about it here. Sorry, let me drink a little water. Does anybody know about OpenAI? So OpenAI is a research company in Silicon Valley that was founded by Elon Musk and some others in the valley. And they basically developed the world's most sophisticated AI model for language learning. There's some example of this if you Google OpenAI. The Guardian has a wonderful article that was written entirely by the AI, and it looks like a human wrote it. So it's very scary in that they fed sort of the whole internet into the machine learning algorithm, so it's able to, I wouldn't say understand language, but definitely reproduce language in a way that looks like a human wrote it. So basically we're using OpenAI and their algorithm. We got access to it. They're still in private beta, but we're using this in the next version to make it easier to generate parts of your research papers. So if you're writing a sort of a literature review or whatever, you can select all of the papers that you want. You can feed it into the algorithm, and it will will spit out sort of a condensed version of that. So you'll get like a literature review. But you still have to obviously go back and revise and make the document your own and fact check and all of this. But the idea is that it will save you time. The same way you could sort of take a complicated text and let the AI make it into plain English, because when we're reading research papers, usually it's not plain English, it's just confusion. And then, so once we did this sort of, we made the product, we saw the need, we created the MVP, the minimum viable product, and we got a lot of good response from academia. We had dozens of universities on their websites that were linking to us and recommending us, including Princeton University, University of Connecticut, and others. I believe also on the Chalmers writing guide, you'll find Avidnote mentioned there. Once we saw this positive feedback, we realized there's a market for this, and we should sort of do this full time. So in 2020, we released the minimum viable product. We got immediately about 500 researchers from different universities all around the world who signed up. We got a lot of good feedback. People were very positive. But at the same time, we got some issues with the PDF system that we were using. It was very basic because we wanted to create a minimum viable product, not sort of the advanced product. So what we had to do was to refine it and make it better and to sort of respond to the feedback that we got. People wanted to have references there. They wanted to be able to find their papers there. So we added all of this in the sort of commercial version. And then we released that version in 2021. Right around this time, we also got some funding from or some grants, I should say, from the Swedish Innovation Agency, Vinnova, and you can also, if you're interested in starting a startup, they're very good in terms of if you have a research sort of problem that you want to turn into a product. The same thing with Almi, they can also help out and give some grants. And then we were part of an incubator. We have Martin right over there. You can stand up so everybody sees you. So if you're interested in talking with Martin, he's actually my advisor from Founders Loft. It's an incubator that's right here at Chalmers E-village, literally a stone throw away. I think you can throw a stone from there and hit the building. So, and they focus on sort of SaaS-based startups, software as a service, digital startups sort of. So we joined there, we got a lot of good support, and also they didn't take any equity, so that was good, thank you. But there are also other options. Obviously, we're at Chalmers, you have Chalmers Ventures. Chalmers Ventures is a very good option if you're coming within throughout the Chalmers sort of ecosystem. You also have Chalmers Innovation if you're a sort of a researcher that has an idea and you want to turn that into a product. You can talk with them. You can actually get up to, I think, 300,000 in free sort of grants. So those are all very good options. So we launched in 2021. We got customers from the US, from Sweden. Most of our users are actually from the US because that's, you know, they're like very big, a big country. So we started selling commercially, and we also started competing. So we were part of the Venture Cup. They have that every year. If you're interested, you can apply now, I think, maybe for the next batch. I'm not entirely sure. And we won 2 prizes there as well. But personally, I think, although it's been a very good experience with Venture Cup, and we would definitely redo it and recommend it, I think the most important thing is to focus on your product and to solve the need of your customers or your users. Okay, so the next part, I just want to sort of extract a few generic lessons that I sort of gained from this experience and this journey that I want to share with you. The first thing has to do with motivation. So people always talk about being motivated, you know, loving what you do. You know, Confucius has this saying, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life. And that's true, 100%. But at the same time, motivation will never get you to the finish line. It will only get you starting. Like, you can be very motivated to do something, but in order to finish, you have to do work those days when you don't want to do work, when it's raining and you're depressed, you just want to sit down and watch Netflix. Those days are the days that really matter, right? And so instead of motivation, I think it's all about perseverance. It's about sort of forcing yourself to work on those days when it is difficult, rather than trying to seek motivation all the time. So it's about building that character of always being relentless, having goals, and making sure that those goals are reachable and challenging. Because if they're not, you know, reachable, then there's no point in it. And if not challenging, then why are you even doing it, right? So this wonderful saying in Swedish that I like, that you should sort of sikta mot stjärnorna, så når du skogsbrynet. Like, if you aim towards the stars, you will at least reach the sort of the forest. So the higher you aim, the higher you land. And if you sort of aim low, you won't reach that high. So the idea is try to be more ambitious than you. Even if you realistically think it's not possible, you should be more optimistic. And then if you fall, at least you'll fall closely to where you aimed. And then this example I would always bring sort of to my students. I think it's a wonderful example because partly it's a fish that I love. You know, it tastes very good, the gädda. I think it's called the northern pike in English. But it's all obviously native to these waters. And what they did, there was a group of researchers here in Sweden who had nothing else to do. They took this fish and they put it into an aquarium. You know, like researchers are very curious. And in the aquarium, they put the gädda. I'll call it a gädda. It's a better name than pike. So they took the gädda and then they put sort of a glass barrier in between, right? So it's invisible. So it was trying to go through it. And on the other side, they put like small fish. So it's trying to eat the fish. But after a while, it gave up. You know, it kept trying and it kept hitting the glass window. So and then when it stopped, they removed the glass. And then what happened was that this small fish started sort of swimming around the gädda and it wouldn't even react. Because in its mind, you know, it's already given up because there's no point. I've tried and tried and tried, it didn't work. And so even when it hits you in the face, you know, you don't really react because you have this mentality. And I think this can be seen in other examples as well. If you look, for instance, I come from Africa, so I was born in Africa. You have these elephants. They're very majestic creatures. They could crush like all of us, like a group of people, right? But still, somehow, at a circus, they're constrained, right? They can, you know, they play around and they run around. And the reason for that, it's a bit depressing, honestly, because it's a very gruesome way in which they do it. They take the elephant when they're very young, and then they chain them. They put like chains on them. So the elephant tries to run away. It's very small, and it can't. And finally, it gives up. At that point, they remove the chains, but the elephant still has the chains in its mentality, right? In its mindset. So when it's big, it still thinks that it's enslaved. So I think this is one of the issues, that when you're working with something and you have sort of this mentality that it's not possible, then it's not going to be possible if you continue to have that mentality. Similarly, the most important thing that I've learned from, I would say, both academia and startups is that you have to be able to sort of delay gratification. You have to be able to say, you know, I'm not going to be happy about this now, but I'm going to be happy about it later. It's the same thing when you're doing research, because it takes so much time that you have to sort of vision, okay, at some point, this is going to be finished. It's going to be a research paper. It's going to be I'm going to, you know, graduate or whatever. Same thing within the startup world. Most startups, even the ones that are so-called overnight successes, they take like 5, 6, 7 years to be an overnight success. They've been working for many, many years, but people didn't know about it until it became very popular. So what you should be able to do is sort of delay that gratification, to understand that in order to reach that future, you have to prepare right now. And one of my favorite quotes is from Muhammad Ali, who used to say, he used to run like always in the morning, very early, before everybody was sort of up. And he said, you know, I used to tell myself, suffer now and live the rest of your life a champion. So I always like that mentality that if you want to be able to finish something, you have to be able to tell that to yourself every day and keep grinding. And when you grind, you need to also have consequences for your actions. So if you really reached your goals, then you should have tangible rewards. Like, okay, you can take that vacation, or you can read that book, or you can relax, or whatever you want to do. But if you don't reach those goals, you also have to have penalties for yourself. Like, okay, I can't sit on the couch now. I can't take my vacation. There has to be repercussions if you don't meet your goals. And I think that's a good way of sort of creating the carrot and the stick. I don't like carrots, so it should be something else. It becomes a carrot and the carrot. But the most important thing here is sort of to create these habits. So you create these habits. Once you create them, they become part of you. Because like good habits and bad habits, they're both difficult to stop. So if you're a smoker, it's difficult to stop. But also, like if you're brushing your teeth every morning, like if you don't do it one morning, you're going to go crazy, because it's also, good habits are also difficult to stop. So in the beginning, it's difficult to create a habit. You have to have some force, right? So like an analogy that I like, because we're at Chalmers here at the sort of engineering university, is when you look at in mechanics, you have the difference between static friction and dynamic friction. So you have, for instance, an object like a box that you're trying to push, right? In the beginning, it's very difficult to push, because the static friction is higher than the dynamic one. So in the beginning, it's difficult to push, but once you start pushing it, it's easy to keep on pushing. So the dynamic friction is actually lower. So that's sort of a good analogy to startup world. It's difficult to begin, but once you get going, it becomes easier and you get momentum, you know. So the most important thing is always to just start and not to think about the past, because it's easy to get sort of involved with the past and think, okay, I've spent all of this time on this project or this product and it's not working, but I've already wasted so much money. I might as well wait some, you know. But that's a bad way of working. What you should do is objectively look at the situation. If it's a bad investment, just drop it. Even if you wasted money and time, you should just drop it. And I think this graph is true for most people at Chalmers, at this university or universities in general, where you have, if you give an assignment to a student, they're going to do it a few hours before, you know, it's the deadline, right? But what they don't know, the students, is that the teacher, they usually also prepare a few hours before the deadline. So everything is like, the people are working at the very closest edge of the deadline. Suddenly, the productivity sort of explodes. And this way of working is always obviously very inefficient. The best thing to do is, if you have some task, you should start immediately. And you should always start like right now. So the Chinese have the saying that the best time to sort of plant a tree was 20 years ago, that the second best time is today. So if you want to do something, just start. So I get some questions sometimes in terms of sort of the startup process. My advice always just to start. Like, don't overthink it, don't overplan it. Perspiration is more important than preparation. Sweating, working is much more important than trying to fine-tune it. And I think this is one of the problems when you come from my world in research, where you're very meticulous, right? You have to get everything right. Sort of the variance has to be exactly correct. And but in sort of in the startup world, no, you can start with something that's half functioning, and you just keep on going. Right? So I would take it as an exercise today. Go and look at all of the big startups, you know, that became big companies like Facebook and Airbnb and so forth. Go to archive.org, write their website, and you can see how their website used to look like when they started. You can go back in time, and they always look awful. Like the product looks awful, the website looks awful, but they just started and then they kept going, right? So move fast and sort of break things. It's the methodology of Facebook, but I think it's a good methodology when you're little, but once you become big, you have to be careful so you don't get privacy issues and whatnot. So once you start, always start with the ugliest, biggest frog. So if you have a lot of tasks that you want to do, in my mind, I always like to do the easiest things, right? You want to do the things you can cross off, you respond to some emails, you do some easy calls, but the actual work, the actual sort of, you have to call these people, you have to write this, you know, the difficult things, we postpone those things. So I think the best thing to do is, if you have 3 frogs that you have to eat, you eat the ugliest frog first, right? And then you can look forward to eating the smaller, less ugly one. So when the task is done, all that remains are the easy ones. So my final slide here. This comes from an Italian economist. I think he wrote in the late 1800s. And what he noticed was the distribution of work. So if you have, for example, say that you have a company, and you have 10 people in that company, 80% of the results will come from 20% of the people. So if you have 10 people, two people will do most of the work. They will do like 80% of the work. And this is true in group work. So if you have 5 students, one person will do like 80% of the work, and the remaining 4 will do 20%. Like, this ratio will differ, obviously, depending on the context. Could be 30, 70, and so forth. But the idea is that you should identify the tasks that actually bring you that 80% of the output. If it's a specific marketing channel, for instance, you should focus on that channel, because it will give you 80% of the results, and everything else becomes sort of air. So that's most important sort of thing to consider when thinking about how to delegate your work. I see my time is basically up here, so I also want to end with a poem that I think sort of encapsulates everything that I spoke about today. I think it's one of my favorite poems. It was written by a Nobel Prize-winning author, Rudyard Kipling, in the 1800s, and he was addressing his son. He basically starts out the poem by saying "if." So the whole poem is sort of circulating around this word. So he says, "If you can dream and not make dreams your master, if you can think and not make thoughts your aim, if you can meet with triumph and disaster and treat those 2 impostors just the same, if you can bear to hear the truth you've spoken, twisted by knaves to make a trap for fools, or watch the things you gave your life to be broken and stoop and build them up with worn-out tools, If you can make a heap of all of your winnings and risk it on one turn of pitch and toss and lose and start at your beginnings and never breathe a word about your loss, if you can force your heart and nerve and sinew to serve your turn long after they are gone, and so hold on when there is nothing in you except for the will which says to them, hold on, if you can walk with crowds and keep your virtue, or talk with kings nor lose the common touch, if all men count with you but none too much, if you can fill the unforgiving minute with 60 seconds worth of distance run, yours is the earth and everything that's in it. And which is more, you'll be a man, my son. Thank you for listening.
What a morning boost. Yes. I feel sort of taking this feeling away by having some questions. But I guess maybe some of you down here have some questions for Abderisak before he leaves. He's also here if you want to have some personal questions for him, of course.
Yeah, and if you want to contact me, you have my address there, adam@avidnote.com.
That's great. Just, yes, one question.
Oh, that's a very good question. I think in terms of the goals, I think when you're in the startup world, we usually don't think in those long horizons because you don't know what's up in the next month, less so in 3 years. I think in large companies, it's much easier to sort of create those prognoses. But in terms of the sort of the progress that we're working on, when it comes on the product side, it's sort of the things that I was talking about before. So we're trying to integrate this AI model into Avidnote, which we think will sort of revolutionize the way that academic work can be done. Because if you can take away all of the monotonous sort of manual part of the research process, what you're left with is the creative part, where you focus more on the sort of what sets you aside in terms of defining the research problem and finding analytics for it. And then in terms of the sort of the progress, we're sold to like individual researchers now all over the world, but now we're working on sort of closing in the university sales, which is a much more difficult problem. So if you look at the way that sort of the academic market works, it's much easier to get individual researchers, groups, departments to buy your software. But when it comes to entire universities, it's a much more difficult process. You have to sort of go from the bottom up in order to sort of get a lot of users, and then it becomes easier to sort of scale up. So at the moment, we're focusing on Sweden and the US. So that's in terms of our market. Yeah. I don't know if do you guys want to add something to this? We have some of the co-founders here. No, they say no. So okay.
Any more questions?
Okay,
you said just one more for me then.
Okay.
You said that it's easy or it's very important to aim for the stars.
Yeah.
And I know that a big star for you was actually to study at Chalmers when you were smaller.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's 100%. When we're kids, me and Senad, he's not here today, but we used to always drive by because the tram drives by here. So we would always say we're going to be engineers over there. We didn't know it would be the experience, obviously. It's difficult, and we imagined it to be just the building, because when you, from the tram station, you see the Chalmers logo, and you think that's the university, that building there. You don't realize there's a whole campus. But yeah, that's true. So it was a very good experience for me to.
So you actually aimed for the treetops, and you actually got to the stars.
And I hope.
So
I hope so.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So thank you very, very much, and we wish you much good luck for the future, and we wish you very, very welcome also back in 2 weeks when we have the next inspirational speaker. We also, Adam has some flowers for you, of course.
Thank you.
And we also have, since we want to keep you here at Chalmers E-village, this is a card loaded with some money, so you can go for lunch or buy something in the Chalmers shop or something. And we do it this nice way. So thank you very much for this inspiration, and I wish you a nice day and a nice week, and hope to see you again in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Bye.